And Keith, what we're looking at now and going forward, I believe, is a race not for Romney to win the nomination, but for Santorum and Gingrich to stop him from getting the majority. And I think that becomes more probable now. What is not probable is Santorum or Gingrich winning this nomination, winning enough delegates if both of them stay in the race. I look at the numbers on Santorum, the likely delegate count he'll have tonight. He is going to need almost 65% of the remaining delegates up for grabs after tonight to win the nomination. Gingrich closer to 70%. Neither of them are going to do that if both of them are still in the race. The only way it happens is if one of them drops out and throws his support to the other. But both of them staying in the race can keep Romney from getting the majority.
They can keep him for how long?
I think all the way, we've got these big states coming at this thing's back-ended. We've talked a lot about the front-loaded, but there are huge states, California, Pennsylvania, New York, Indiana, coming late. And so they could stay in, and we could be looking at end of the contest in June where Romney's the runaway leader in delegates but doesn't have enough to win. And then the Republican Party and these candidates are all going to have to hash it out all summer long to go to a convention with an actual nominee.
Now, obviously, we've changed American politics, presidential politics, in the last 40 years since the last brokered convention, or even the hint of a brokered convention. We've rewritten the rules about when the campaigns start. Suddenly, the idea that you'd only have a campaign that lasted 3 or 4 months would be an insufficient time to unseat an incumbent president when, again, it's 100 years ago, but Teddy Roosevelt didn't start running as a third-party candidate until, August or September of 1912, and he finished second and nearly won a three-way race. So obviously the world has turned. But how serious an impediment is it to the Republicans to try to unseat a personally popular and increasingly in individual poll numbers popular president with perhaps a strengthening economy if they don't officially get their campaign started until June, July, August?
And we're seeing two things happening is with this race and all the vitriol in it between the Republican candidates is just plummeting support among independent voters. But Republican voters just less and less enthusiastic about that. You talked earlier about the early voting in Ohio indicates about half what it was in 2008 indicates low turnout in this. Another thing pollsters are telling me, Keith, is something they have not seen before is when they when they try to identify likely voters in primary, they have as high as double-digit increases in the number of people they call who self-identify as not being likely voters. And that's something pollsters I've talked to said they've never seen before in either party, that big a difference from past campaigns.
So who's the grown-up in the Republican equation who steps in and tries to avert this mess that you have so articulated tonight?
Well, it's more like an orphanage with no grown-ups. I think this party, that's the other thing. There are no political bosses out there to come in and say, okay, this is what's going to happen. The power is more behind the scenes. The money people, the fundraisers, the people who fuel the Republican Party, who are going to start making noises to, coalesce around Romney, Gingrich, and Santorum, you're out of here. But they may not listen. Who will listen are the sugar daddies that fund them and their super PACs, which is the only thing keeping them going. And these guys, these money guys, for both of them that we've talked about so much, they're big players in the Republican Party. They want to continue to be big players in the Republican Party. They do not want to become pariahs, despite all their money. That's one thing. That's some leverage over them that the Republican leaders would have, congressional leaders. That hey, if you want to play in our pool much longer, you need to swim with us.
But is that perhaps, if we just narrowed in on something that there was another unintended and unpredictable result of Citizens United and that extraordinary Supreme Court decision, that now that threat of becoming a pariah inside a party, let alone unduly influencing an actual election by an endless supply of money, just the idea that somebody could tell you you're going to be a pariah in the Republican Party, and Sheldon Adelson says, I'll bet you $100 million I don't become a pariah and you never get elected again to anything.
Yeah, that's the reverse leverage there. But
Yeah.
this is a club these people are in. I mean, they're friends. They fly around in their jets together and so on. I mean, it's almost like a country club, and it really is. I mean, so they don't want to be looked at as the guy that just screwed everything up, for beating Obama. And that's the other thing. These are men who, foremost, Adelson and Freeze for Santorum, first and foremost, they want to beat Obama. And we're getting to the point where they've got to realize their candidate is not going to get the nomination, and continuing to fund them is only going to make it more difficult for Republicans to beat Obama.
One will recall that 4 years ago, when what we thought was a contentious nomination for the Democratic process for the Democratic nomination extended into June because the now Secretary of State believed that she needed and was obligated to continue to run, when in retrospect, that at its worst, I mean, she said, "Shame on you, Barack Obama," once. That was about 1/30th of what goes on each week in the Republican primary, to the point that we played those pieces of tape from Barbara Bush earlier, and her amazement that this is actually going on. So why would there be an assumption that common sense would prevail at any point and the Republicans wouldn't simply deliberately just all jump off this cliff?
Well, there are a couple of differences. I don't buy the comparisons people make to 2008 with this race, because there were a couple of big differences. One, it was actually after Super Tuesday when there was a lot of pushing on Hillary to get out, but there was a lot of pushback from her side. At the grassroots level, pushing back on that notion, and that kept her going. The other big difference from then that we're seeing now is, as that race continued between Obama and Clinton through those primaries, turnout was growing.
Exactly.
Democrats were so into that campaign; they were actually drawing more voters. They had some huge turnout increases even toward June in that race. So it actually grew the base of the Democratic Party. And once you get people voting in your primary, it's a lot easier to get them to the general election, even if their candidate doesn't win sometimes. And we're not seeing that. We're seeing the opposite effect on the Republican Party.
And true to your point, the number of issues that were being discussed at least did not decrease over the course of the Clinton-Obama race, and may have to some degree increased from the February-March end of it to the May-June end of it. And that certainly is not happening in the Republican campaign.
Right.
Craig Crawford has seen most of this coming, and I think we need to do the proverbial hat tip to you on how this is turning out, particularly in Ohio. Congratulations, Craig. You may be the only victor here.
I put my tinfoil hat on South Carolina primary when I talked about it, but I think now I can wear a regular hat.
I think tinfoil is in, my friend. Craig Crawford of CraigCrawford.com. Thank you, Craig.
Good to be here.